Rain tapped like scattered fingers on the kitchen window while I folded the clean linen. Into disciplined squares, the radio mumbled a song from another decade, filling the silence. That had become both habit and comfort. My life had shrunk to small certainties: the whistle of the kettle, the postman's nod, the cat's predictable disdain. Then Ethan arrived, dripping rain and energy into my afternoon. He moved through the narrow kitchen with the restlessness of someone carrying a secret. Water fell from his jacket in nervous drops. He spoke of ordinary things: lectures, bills, the price of petrol. Yet his eyes kept darting toward his pocket. When he finally hugged me goodbye, I felt a folded slip pressed into my palm. 3 words, shaky and deliberate: check storage unit to 147. For a moment I simply stared, reading them again, as if repetition could make sense appear. My husband Peter had once rented a unit, long forgotten, long unpaid, before illness took his attention, and then his life. The note trembled in my hand, softening under the warmth of the kettle's steam. Ethan paused in the doorway, eyes bright with a weight he couldn't carry alone. He said, "You'd understand," he whispered. Then he was gone, leaving rain, silence, and a question that stirred the dust of years. The hallway clock resumed its measured tick, each second insisting that I would not sleep until I knew I met Peter Davies. When we were barely more than children to cautious students in a college laboratory, that smell of metal filings and ozone, he made sparks dance from copper wire and called it art disguised as physics. I, too timid to speak, pretended fascination, only to keep him talking. I married him because his eyes held the sort of light that made fear seem manageable. All through the years that followed, he remained a quiet storm of invention: circuit boards spread across our dining table, sketches tucked between grocery lists, his handwriting a whirl of half-formed ideas. He taught physics at the local high school, guiding his students toward paths he never took. The pay was modest, the recognition slimmer still, yet he never complained when larger companies released devices eerily similar to designs he had once sketched. Each time he simply smiled, murmuring, "Progress doesn't need my name on it." Still, I carried the bruises of pride for both of us. We build our life with gentle thrift, second-hand furniture polished to a shine, summer holidays translated into garden picnics. Our children grew sturdy and impatient and then flew away. Peter faded after the strokes began, his gaze drifting between lucidity and silence. When he died 10 years ago, I folded his unfinished patents into a showbox and told myself I was closing a chapter. Yet closure is not obedience, it's a promise unkept. Ethan, our daughter's boy, became the unexpected rhythm of my widowed years. He breezed into my kitchen, smelling of petrol and youth, always leaving crumbs and laughter in his wake. We had that comfortable friction only generations manage. He teased me about my recipe cards and 3-ring binders. I scolded his tangles of excuses for postponed classes. Beneath the banter I felt his restlessness and untuned chords. Some months ago I noticed his eyes carried the same absent focus that once haunted Peter, the gaze of someone dreaming while pretending not to. The note he left, check storage unit to 147, had jolted an earlier memory. I remember the day Peter and I signed the rental papers. He mumbled something about needing space for projects that might outlive us later. When hospitalization consumed our savings, I'd simply stop paying the fees, assuming the unit, long reclaimed by strangers, that should have been the end of it. Yet Ethan somehow found a record, had even spoken those loaded words. He said, "You'd understand." The phrasing gnawed at me. He said, "Who's he?" My husband's name lodged behind my teeth like a secret, too absurd to voice around the house. Small relics began whispering louder, the solder iron still hidden behind the broom, the faint smell of sawdust. When rain hit the shed floor, I could almost hear Peter humming while tightening a bolt, his quiet optimism bending the air. The more I tried to dismiss it as sentimentality, the more tangible it became, the image of him lifting his head, eyes bright, as if waiting for me to finish a sentence left suspended 10 years ago. By the time night settled, I'd folded Ethan's note carefully beside my wedding ring dish, promising myself I would inquire about that storage unit tomorrow. My heart carried both excitement and guilt, the thrill of trespassing into someone's unfinished dreams, somewhere between grief and curiosity. I felt Peter's presence, leaning close, not haunting me, but gently urging, "Go see what love left behind." Dawn bled through the clouds like watered ink. As I steered my sputtering sedan toward the industrial side of town, the road was slick and the tires hummed their own rhythm of hesitation. My wipers moaned against the windshield, and in their metronome I heard my doubts repeat, what business did an old widow have chasing ghosts? Through metal corridors, yet curiosity has its own age-defying. Hung to the storage complex rose ahead in harsh lines of white steel, every edge glaringly modern. Where my memory recalled flaking paint and a faded sign inside the office. A young clerk looked at me with polite suspicion, then began typing name. He asked, I gave it, half afraid the system would laugh at me. Instead he frowned thoughtfully. Account opened 2000 for unpaid since 2013, but recent payments logged under an E. Davies. My stomach tightened. Ethan, my careful cash-poor grandson, had been paying this rent for how long, and why? The clerk slid me a digital key and perfunctory waiver. You need to for 7 down, that quarter second left. His voice floated behind me as I walked into the echoing hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed. My shoes ticked against concrete that smelled faintly of dust. In antiseptic, the numbers counted upward to 45 to 46. And then there it was, unit to 147. The padlock gleamed brand new, almost ceremonial. My hands shook slightly as I entered the code and pulled the latch metal side open, releasing an unexpected scent. Solder, pine, machine oil, a scent I hadn't breathed in 10 years. Instead of chaos, the room was immaculate. Plastic bins lined the walls, each labeled with precise lettering. Beneath a workbench lay stacks of notebooks, and above, pinned under a strip of tape, a photograph of Peter, younger than memory usually allowed. Each box bore the same careful scrawl. BD Prototype Series 1. Pressed my thumb over the initials. As though touching his skin through time, I lifted a lid. Inside lay circuit boards, neatly wrapped cables, handwritten diagrams. I recognized that looping. Why? Immediately, Peter's hand, quick and assured, but woven among those papers were newer sheets, bright white, inked in a modern style. Ethan's handwriting, Tidier digital sketches printed alongside phrases: test model 3 works, battery conversion successful, legacy plan pending. The realization swelled so fast I had to sit on the low stool. Ethan had resurrected Peter's inventions, had not only discovered them, but carried them toward completion, shaping pieces of his grandfather's dream. With 21st century tools on a small shelf sat a series of objects that looked both familiar and alien: a solar lantern with a hand-turned brass switch, a foldable toolkit, a canister humming faintly that might purify water. A pang entered the wonder. Why hadn't he told me? Was it pride or fear? I'd stop him. My first instinct, absurdly parental, was worry. How much had this cost him? Tuition, overdue rent, and paid. Yet he quietly funded a forgotten project belonging to a man who never tasted success. I pulled out my phone and called. No answer. Again, voicemail. The silence in that narrow hall was so complete that even my heartbeat sounded like knocking. I remember Peter in our kitchen the night he burned another prototype failure. His fingers red from solder burns, murmuring, they'll mock me now, but ideas always find a home eventually. I had comforted him, then telling him we needed no recognition. But looking around, I saw how false that reassurance had been. Recognition mattered, even if only to a grandson who'd inherited the ache. Carefully, I closed the bins. As I found them before switching off the light, I slipped one blueprint, a fragile page, sketching a modest purification pump, into my handbag, its edges frayed against the lining. Like a pulse, I locked the door behind me, feeling both trespasser and trusty outside. The rain had ceased, the sky heavy but clearing. As I walked to my car, I thought of Ethan's quiet smile, of Peter murmuring through his absent years, and wondered if either of them knew how like they were. The same stubborn flame burning between generations. Sleep eluded me that night. Thoughts spun like threads caught in a fan's slow whir. The house settled around me. The kettle hissed once as the pipes cooled. The clock gave its stubborn tick. Hand still, I could not place Ethan's secret in any comfortable corner of reason. At last I rose, switched on the lamp, and fetched Peter's old notebooks from the shelf where memory lives with dust. The pages smelled faintly of graphite and old dreams. Equations marched confidently across margins I once polished without reading. Now I traced them with reverence, trying to hear the logic behind his pen strokes. Beside them I spread Ethan's papers, the fresh ink, neat diagrams, and coded printouts he'd left at the storage unit placed side by side. I could almost see them conversing. Father of invention meeting grandson of adaptation. Peter's hurried sketches spoke in analog enthusiasm. Ethan's replies breathed in digital precision. Line by line I followed their silent dialogue. Emails printed out, each polite and earnest messages. to an incubator program inquiries to a patent lawyer, whose letterhead shimmered faintly under lamplight. There it was clear. As Confession Project Davies and Davies Foundry, my fingers shivered. Over the name, the symmetry of it, a bridge between what was imagined and what might finally be finished, felt like a prayer answered. Before spoken, Ethan's intention unfolded in careful detail. Goal: commercial prototype, submission, vision, affordable. Portable purifiers for crisis zones. Reading those words, I felt something within me rearrange. I had always framed Peter's tinkering as gentleness misplaced, but seeing Ethan pursue it with this fierce practicality rewrote that belief. Perhaps faith in an idea is inherited like I colored quietly, relentlessly as dawn brushed the curtains pale. I tried to picture Ethan at work, a young man bent over circuitry, hands raw from trial, fluorescent light carving shadows across a stubborn jaw. Maybe he whispered to the photograph taped above the workbench. Maybe he argued with ghosts. Maybe he simply believed that redemption sometimes requires a soldering iron and patience. The vision filled me with ache and pride so intermixed I couldn't separate them. When morning truly came, I brewed tea, but couldn't drink it by noon. I had found myself driving once more to Unit 147. The custodian barely looked up as I passed. Inside the silent space, I saw the evidence of long nights: coffee rings, an old jacket folded over the chair, a small pillow on a crate. The air smelled of effort. On impulse, I unpacked the basket I'd brought: sandwiches, fresh gloves, a thermos of tea, and arranged them neatly beside his tools. Before leaving, I wiped the dust from the bench, a small maternal benediction. The act felt sacred, a ritual of continuity between two dreamers who shared blood and stubbornness. Back home, the evening spread calm, but my mind refused it. I sat by the window, watching the coastal fog roll and thinking of how time disguises purpose. We call absences failure, forgetting that some seeds sleep seasons longer than others. Peter's quiet persistence, once pitied, had turned to legacy. Under our grandson's hands, the discovery made me humble for the first time since widowhood. I whispered aloud, "You were right, love, ideas do endure." Still, fear prowled along the edges of my pride. The world could be cruel to idealists. I had watched it flatten Peter with bureaucracy and indifference. Could Ethan bear that same dismissal? Yet when I imagined stopping him, my resolve faltered. Better he stumbled chasing light than stand safely in the dark sorting through his notes again. I found a highlighted line: Innovation Fair Friday. He had never mentioned it, but the date glowed with significance. My decision came quietly, as most important ones do. I would go, I would see what his courage and perhaps Peter's ghost had built from dust and devotion. Saturday morning dawned bright and sharp, the kind of air that makes even an old heart move briskly. The community center parking lot overflowed with vans and hopeful chatter inside. Banners announced the Innovation Fair 2024. Their colors too vivid for my cautious eyes. The hall smelled of coffee, solder, and anticipation. Every table glittered with devices that promised to change the world. Before lunch, robots with blinking eyes, apps flashing on tablets, and young voices pitching the future in phrases curled around excitement. I felt like a ghost wandering a world that had sprinted ahead without me. Then at the far corner, beneath a flickering light, I saw him. Ethan stood beside a makeshift booth, no larger than my ironing board. His friend adjusted wires while he smoothed a wrinkled sheet of cardboard that read in plain lettering, "Portable Clean Water System Davies." And Davies, the words caught in my throat. I whispered them again internally, their shared surname shining like promise. He hadn't seen me. I lingered behind a group of students until the judges began circulating. A man in a crisp jacket approached their booth, clipboard poised, expression skeptical. Ethan's hands trembled just enough for me to notice. His voice started thin, polite, discussing filtration rates and solar panels. The judge nodded distractedly, already glancing toward the next eager team. And then it happened. Ethan looked up and caught my gaze. For an instant, his composure shattered. I thought he might faint. Instead, I saw his throat move, saw him take a deliberate breath, and his posture straightened when he spoke again. His voice filled the space, steady and warm. "This design," he said, "began 40 years ago. My grandfather drew the first sketch by candlelight after the water supply in our town ran dry one summer in 1983. He believed simple tools should serve ordinary people. He never sold a prototype, but his ideas are here, rewritten with better materials for today." Every word was a gift wrapped in humility. The judge's pen "Stop moving," somewhere behind me someone whispered. "That's lovely." I lowered my head, tears thickening my vision. I remember that summer. He mentioned the cracked soil, Peter's oily hands fumbling with plastic tubing, our neighbors chuckling at his optimism. I had once told him to rest, that the world didn't need more dreamers. Now I watched our grandson bring that dream into the clean light of morning. The man in the jacket motioned for a demonstration. Ethan pressed a button. The small metal box hummed softly and produced a trickle of clear water that pooled into a glass. The simplicity of it, the quiet usefulness, seemed to hush the room. The judge tasted the result, nodded once, then again. Slower applause began at one table and widened until it filled the hall, like applause always does, cresting before emotion quite catches up. A journalist with a camera hurried forward, snapping pictures. "Family project?" she asked. Ethan smiled shyly. "Generations project," she scribbled that down. A host in a headset gathered the judges to announce their selections. I barely breathed as he read community grant and partnership, Davies and Davies portable clean water system. The crowd clapped again, kind but not boisterous. Even the sound seemed respectful. Ethan looked out, caught my face once more, and this time he didn't flinch from the tears glistening there. "My grandmother," he said suddenly, before anyone could escort him off stage, "told me stories when I was 10 about how my grandfather's eyes used to light up when he invented new things. I found the storage receipt because of one of those stories. I just wanted to see if the light could still glow." The journalist turned her lens toward me. The moment felt impossibly large and softly private all at once. My old instinct was to vanish, yet pride steadied my knees. I walked forward, not rushed, not self-conscious, just calm. The crowd opened to make a path. Ethan reached out, uncertain whether he should hug me or bow. We were both trembling. I placed a hand on the device between us, its metal still warm from operation. Then I said, heart balanced between joy and memory, "We'll finish what he started." The hall erupted once more, but the details blurred in a quiet that belonged only to me. I saw Peter as I remembered him, ink-stained and grinning, saying, "Progress doesn't need my name on it." Perhaps he'd been wrong. Perhaps what progress needs is its lineage. Standing there in my gray coat amid the whirl of cameras and congratulations, I felt our family's modest history unfold like a banner no one could ignore. For decades we had been small figures in other people's margins. Now, not with vengeance, but with grace, our story rewrote its own footnote. Humility had become its own bright headline, shining not as glory, but as peace. Dusk had mellowed to violet by the time we reached the parking lot. The laughter and hum of the fair muffled behind glass doors, leaving only the wind shuffling paper banners and the metallic sigh of cooling engines. Ethan lingered beside the car, rubbing his palms on his jeans like a boy. "Again, I should have told you," he said finally, voice small. "After so much applause, I just thought you'd think I was wasting time." I pretended to ponder this, unlocking the car with deliberate calm. "Next time, at least leave your grandmother a blueprint," I said, putting on my stern expression, which crumbled almost immediately into a laugh. His own laughter followed, dry, relieved, contagious sand. For a long minute we simply stood there, the two ends of a family line, tied together by foolish secrecy and forgiven pride. Back home the kettle resumed its kingdom. Ethan set up his laptop on the dining table while I unearthed boxes of photo albums whose pages stuck like shy acquaintances. He scanned pictures of Peter bending over prototypes of our children as startled toddlers beside wires and pipes. Every click of the scanner felt like resurrecting a heartbeat wheel. "Build a little site," Ethan said, eyes reflecting the glow of the screen, so his work is never forgotten. Our evenings found a new pattern: sandwiches wrapped in flour bags, beside the patient hum of his computer or the soft rustle of my scrapbooks. I corrected captions, he corrected circuitry. Between us stretched a companionship both industrious and tender. Outside, attention trickled soon enough: a brief newspaper feature, a local radio interview, an email from the grant committee offering further funding. People called to congratulate, some of them the same voices that once called Peter unrealistic. I accepted their praise, politely aware that vindication tastes sweetest when served without boast. Spring touched the garden before I noticed roses that had sulked for years suddenly erupted into bloom. While pruning them, I thought of all the forms recognition can take: money, nameplate, citations, but none as enduring as the look on Ethan's face when he realized his grandfather's dream had outlived cynicism. I stood there amid petals and weeds quietly thankful that the world had learned. This small lesson in time, what it had finally noticed was not Peter or Ethan alone, but the shape of integrity moving through generations like sunlight through water. A year later, the envelope arrived by registered post, its government insignia crisp against cream paper. I carried it to the porch before opening, preferring daylight to witness the moment. Inside lay a single document, official stamped, immaculate patent number 419,873, inventors Peter Davies, post them Ethan Davies. Beneath the typeset letters the archivist had tucked my own small edition, the handwritten note I persuaded them to file and to record, and his wife, who believed. I read it twice, breathing in the salted air that still smelled faintly of roses and the sea. Ethan was in the yard, surrounded by neighborhood children, explaining resistance and voltage with a patience inherited directly from his grandfather. Strands of wire glinted in the afternoon sun like spilled light. Each laugh that rose from that circle felt like a continuation of something old, and good. Time had achieved its symmetry at last. Peter's sketchbook dreams, once folded and forgotten, had taken a generation to reassemble. What he built from faith, Ethan had completed through endurance, while I served merely as the hinge connecting their efforts. Watching the young faces lean toward discovery, I understood that legacy is less about ownership than permission to imagine, to persevere, to try again without fear of ridicule. The waves beyond the dunes were making the same sound they had on the night I first met Peter, a rhythm both timeless and tender. I lifted my cup of tea, feeling its warmth seep through china into my hands, and whispered a quiet thank you to the wind, to him, to the stubborn love that refused extinction. Wealth, I realized, is measured neither in patents nor praise. It lives in the continuance of care and work, done honorably, in stories told around workbenches and kitchen tables. Real wealth isn't what we store away, but what survives us with love. The tide advanced in soft shushes, blurring footprints carrying hush and benediction alike. Somewhere behind me, laughter sparked again, like a wire meeting current, and I smiled. Our long hidden legacy at last shining in open day. Asterisk.